Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Film Exiles podcast. Today, we have some breaking news, I guess you could say, not us ourselves, but we're actually going to be delving into some breaking news that just happened today. A lot of news, actually, from some very popular franchises, some coming back after years of being in our memories, and some news from some big companies that are, let's just say the deals are very interesting what's happening involving Disney and Sony with Spider-Man. So today I am Millennial Mike and I have Lupe with me. He's been on a few of our podcasts as of lately. How is it going today, Lupe?
It's going well. Very exciting news today. This is one of the more impactful news days when it comes to sort of like Hollywood and film news. And I just thought that instead of
Inspiration?
yeah.
Well, we don't typically do news. And Lupe is like, hey, this is pretty big. We should get on it while it's hot. And I'm like, well, why not?
Why not? Yeah, because we're going to talk about Spider-Man, but we're also going to talk about The Matrix, which is my favorite film ever.
I'm about to do some Exile for Reasons here in a second.
Yeah, I mean it's my favorite, film franchise, and it's pretty big news. And so I thought that instead of, just, talking about it in private conversations, we can share our thoughts with people who subscribe to us.
Sure. Well, so I guess we should go ahead and delve into what has happened. So basically, the two main pieces of news we're going to be talking about, as you probably have deduced from this point, is Spider-Man and The Matrix. So both two big franchises. We'll go ahead and get started with Spider-Man, but basically, the deal between Sony and Disney has broken down. Now, we're going to go ahead and talk about this from a financial perspective, from like a business perspective, and then we'll talk about our personal opinions as well about the whole situation. We won't wax too philosophic about it, but we will just enough so you know it's an exile pod. But basically, the deal had ended. After Far From Home, the deal had ended, and they had to re-up on their contract. Sony has chosen to not agree to this new proposal that Disney has. Now, previously they were making, what was it, Lupe? It was 5%, right, of the first day gross of the box office earnings of specifically Spider-Man movies. So that doesn't include things like Venom, and it does not include things like Spider-Verse, but specifically the Spider-Man in which Disney and Sony are sharing, which is John Watts' Spider-Man franchise. So what's this new deal that they're kind of introducing, Lupe?
So the new proposal, I call it the indecent proposal that Disney put
the
on
desecration without name.
A 50-50 split. So 50-50 co-financing, and of course 50-50 split of profits on the Spider-Man franchise, Sony Films, and they were trying to extend it also to every Spider-Man film, every Spider-Man animated film, every Spider-Man character. And so that's vastly different from the business arrangement that they had before, because Sony was not getting any financial profits from Spider-Man movies in the MCU, and we're having a situation now where basically Disney saying that they want 50% of Sony's character. So the proposal was pretty indecent. It's pretty belligerent, and Sony just walked from the table. Like they
Now,
never
just to
it
clarify on this here, this is 50% of all earnings throughout the entire run, or 50% of just the
yes.
first day?
So it's stated as 50-50 co-financing. So that means we're each going to put 50% of going to put down 50% of the cost of the film, and that equates, obviously, without saying, that equates to 50% of the profits
Yeah, that's correct.
profits of the revenue of whatever comes from it.
Now, to my understanding, I just want to corroborate this with you, just make sure that we're getting accurate information. Because from my understanding, according to this Deadline article, they were receiving 5% of the first dollar or the first, that was the first initial day box office. Is that what
No,
you
so
also got from it?
it's not initial day it's not initial day box office. It basically comes down to they get 5% of the profits of the gross.
Okay, so
Yeah.
correction, they're not getting 5% off of the first day. They're getting 5% off of the entire profit of the entire
Yes.
BO run. Okay, got you. Okay, just need to make a correction there. So, with that being said, what did Sony do?
Sony basically just blanked them. I mean, that's what happens basically if you're negotiating a deal and you tender a really bad proposal. Basically, the other side will just drop everything because there's no middle ground. It's basically a waste of time to even try to meet in the middle. So
Yeah,
that's how horrible the deal is on Disney's side.
sure.
So so
Well,
my,
go
my
ahead.
thoughts on it are, from reading the particulars, are first, we have to remember that Spider-Man is Sony's franchise. They own it. It's not Marvel's franchise. It's not Disney's franchise. They bought it with their own money. So they own it now, and they can do whatever they want with it, including burying it in the ground or whatever. It's their own property. It's kind of like, I can't come to your house and tell you what to do with your property if you bought it.
But isn't there
So
some principle that says otherwise?
that the only principle that says otherwise has to do with fandom.
Okay, just wanted to get some clarity on that.
Yeah, there is no like legally it's theirs. They bought it to do whatever they want with it. Now there might be some stipulations, which there usually are, that say that they have to make films, they have to put out films intermittently. So probably like, they must put out one film every 5 years, or else the rights revert back to Marvel, something like that. But
Mhm.
as long as they're doing that, they own it, and they own it to do whatever they will with the franchise. Now,
Got
the
it.
deal between the MCU and Sony has been beneficial to both. It has given goodwill to Sony, and that attachment has helped boost the revenue of of Sony Spider-Man movies.
I
However,
I would argue, and I sorry to interrupt, but I would argue that goodwill isn't is actually a little bit, if I'm being honest, disingenuous, because there was goodwill there. They only lost goodwill after another player entered into the game that devalued the brand in a certain
yeah,
way.
yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. But I'm just looking at it just on the surface. I mean, obviously we're gonna dive deeper, but
I'm
the
just
the
pushing you
deal
a little bit, giving you a little something to respond to.
yeah, no, the deal has been mutually beneficial to both, because Spider-Man is the biggest Marvel character. So Spider-Man not in the MCU is is not a good look for the MCU. So they wanted Spider-Man in there because they knew that it will bring new fans, it will bring new excitement, it will bring new storylines, and they can use this incredible character to enrich their universe. So, but this is the problem the X factor that has come into this
The X factor.
The X factor is basically Marvel fans. Marvel fans, and that includes entertainment media, because these days the lines between fans and bloggers slash entertainment media has been blurred. Like when I read reports about this issue, I'm seeing that the writers are writing from a fan perspective rather than an unbiased professional perspective. And so
That's a very good point.
Shape the narrative, and they engage in trying to force and strong arm Sony into yielding the rights to Marvel. And so that is something that Sony has, that's the X factor that Sony has to contend with now, is how entertainment media shapes the narrative and how fans also shape the narrative. Because the scariest thing for them is that if they go on their own and they make a good Spider-Man film, entertainment media will bash the film, no matter how good it is. And we've seen it happen. The Amazing Spider-Man films were not bad. They were good films. I enjoyed them. And as a matter of fact, I prefer them to the MCU Spider-Man films, to Tom Holland Spider-Man films. And a lot of people enjoy the Tobey Maguire films as well. But there's a new narrative that's saying that, you know, the Tom Holland, you know, Spider-Man is the best Spider-Man ever, which is just, it's just narrative, and it's just Marvel fans being Marvel fans. So that X factor really puts a wrinkle, puts a huge obnoxious crease in the fabric of this, you know, story.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure, you know, how Sony is going to be able to handle the amount of venom. See what I did there? Venom they're going to get from entertainment journalists and from Marvel fans. Yeah. But what do you think? Yeah, you're more of a fan than I am, and have more skin in the game than I do. What do you think?
I'm very interested in seeing what happens. I mean, as far as I am concerned, with this new news that has come out, news like this oftentimes changes or gets amended. Like this, it's always raw and it comes out and it's shocking and it appeals to one person or the other. And then once you see all the subtext and all the asterisks on the document, then you realize that there's so much more to it than just what was initially said. So as far as I'm concerned, nothing has changed from yesterday. Like, this is simply just a proposal of a new idea. Like, the response, and also to the response that we get right now on social media and wherever it may be relevant or wherever it's being talked about, isn't going to hugely impact, in my opinion, what's going to ultimately happen. I think that Sony and Disney have these grand plans for what they want to do. And I think that things like this don't actually impact what happens. I think it impacts the narrative. I think they're able to kind of spin whatever they're going to do one way or the other to kind of, you know, to absorb as much goodwill, because I think goodwill is a very important part of this. Like you mentioned before, you know, Tobey Maguire films, great goodwill. Spider-Man 3 came out, it dipped a little bit. Amazing Spider-Man 1 went up a lot, right? Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out. It went down, especially in the context of the MCU having been out and all that kind of thing. So now we have the situation where, you know, Sony's basically extending an olive branch, so to speak, which is called Tom Holland, right? He's the olive branch. And in the meantime, while that olive branch is being extended, Sony's able to make other Spider-Man projects, and people will not destroy those projects. They won't completely annihilate those projects because they, from a fandom perspective, feel that Sony's being fair. They're giving and they're getting. Marvel is getting Spider-Man, so Sony can have some leeway. You know, they feel that ultimately the people that should be in control are in control, so everything is good in the world.
Could I interrupt just for 1 second? Like, pardon me. I actually don't 100% agree with that. I think the critical reception to Venom and a lot of the chatter that I've heard online is leaning towards
negative.
Yes, it's leaning towards negative, to be sincere. I feel like a lot of people went out to see that film because it was quite interesting. It's a very good film. Probably my favorite superhero film of last year, if I can recall. But the reviews were, as you saw, were incredibly harsh, unfairly so. And I've heard a lot of a lot of Marvel fans talk about how, the Sony characters, don't work without, like the MCU, and don't work without Spider-Man, and sort of putting that negative slant on those films. So I mean, that's my personal opinion.
No, I agree with
I
that. But
kind of
what I mean
disagree,
by
but sorry to
this is
interrupt.
no problem. But the thing is that with the negativity that you have heard about Venom, right? And let's say the negativity you've heard about something like, the latest Josh Trank Fantastic Four or even Dark Phoenix, right? Well, I would even argue that Dark Phoenix is actually, I think, um, I think it has merits that go above and beyond Venom. Like, and I'm not trying to branch off into a different discussion too much, but I need to make this point
Sounds
known.
like you
To,
are.
well, I'm going to do this because I need to give some understanding, some groundwork for what I'm trying to explain here. But basically, what film is going to go down in history as some kind of absolute Frankenstein abomination, right? And then let's talk about that compared to the actual merit of the films, right? So tying all this back into the narrative and into Sony, into the Spider-Man deal and all of that, right? I mean, Venom exists. It's flourished. It has a fan base. It has a lot. There are a lot of positive people online. There's an entire fanfic community and fan art community, and like you have your Venom AVs, and you have like a whole thing here. Now, how niche is it? Well, it's not like your grandpa knows about Venom and he's in the fanfic, fan art community, but there's a very large positive creative presence there that I think is going to continue to sustain that film. Unlike, I think, Dark Phoenix or Fantastic Four, things like that, which is basically like free reign. It's basically like a public latrine, basically. And I don't think Venom is at that. I think because they had Tom Holland over at Disney and Marvel doing their thing, I think that gave them some goodwill. I think a lot of people just not knowing whether Tom Hardy could actually interact with Disney, but there's a possibility. Just that possibility hanging in the air gave a lot of people the reason to believe that, hey, I can go see this and I'm not necessarily supporting the competition necessarily. And I think that really helped it. If there was no relationship there between Disney and Sony, I think that it could be very possible that a lot of the very staunch MCU Marvel Studios fans might have chosen to not watch it or get it through illegitimate means in order to not feel as though they were supporting the competition. That's my take.
Okay. Yeah, I can dig it. So
But
what
we want to move on to is there anything else we need to cover right now with the Spider-Man thing? I think we did that pretty well.
no, I think just in conclusion, it remains to be seen what where the firm ground is, because we are getting, some reports with some Sony execs trying to minimize the situation, saying, oh, it's just a dispute over producer
Credits, yeah.
credits. And
IO9 posted that, right?
yeah, I and I posted that, and that is evidence of them seeing the social media furor from, reporters and Twitter and Instagram posts, and walking their stance back, which is unfortunate, and which leads back to what I said in terms of a lot of this, Spider-Man being in the MCU has to do with pressure from Marvel fans, and it's very unfortunate because I
Well, a
feel
lot
like
of that happened after the Sony hack.
yeah,
I still sustain to this day that Sony would not have made the decision to lend Spider-Man to Disney, and if they weren't compelled to do that after their emails were leaked. and
True.
they were shown to be in talks. I mean, that was of course, an unfortunate circumstance that happened, that fell in one camp's favor more than the other. But at the end of the day, Sony has always been very bullish about their IPs. These companies are willing to make movies just to keep their rights. So I don't think that Sony's changed that much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it remains to be seen where everything lands. I'm not the biggest Spider-Man fan, so whichever way it goes, I'm not going to be heartbroken. I do prefer that we have different franchises and different characters under different umbrellas, and I feel like at the moment Disney has too much of a monopoly on storytelling, and I prefer to see Sony, you know, giving us something different, you know. And that's just my stance on it. But we'll see how it all shakes up. We can talk about the Matrix now.
All right. So we have gotten some news that Matrix 4 is in the works. Wachowski's coming back. Reeves coming back. The pretty much the main crew is all coming back for a fourth movie, and what is now, I suppose, a quadrilogy of films. So can you tell us more about that, Lupe?
Yeah. So first off, let me start by telling the people what the Matrix means to me. The Matrix was my sort of cinematic awakening, my cinematic birth. I've always loved films ever since I was a child. But the first time that I began to really analyze films and sort of see them, in a bit more with a bit more, depth, was The Matrix. And The Matrix is my favorite film of all time. The Matrix trilogy is my favorite, trilogy and franchise of all time. A lot of people don't like The Matrix 2 and The Matrix 3, and I think they're masterpieces. That's how much it means to me. I think they're masterpieces. I have seen and read everything about stories outside the Matrix. So the Animatrix, if you don't know about the Animatrix, go watch that. It's basically an anthology series of stories that happen apart from the Neo and Trinity and Morpheus storyline. Also, I have both both Matrix graphic novels, which is another plethora of stories
Super fan.
about the Matrix world. So I am a Matrix junkie. I used to have like Matrix posters and Matrix action figures. The way like some people love Star Wars, that's how I feel about the Matrix.
So
So
you've been really thirsty, and now the Wachowskis are about to extend that eyedropper full
uh,
of
maybe
ambrosia.
not. Maybe I have a plot twist for you. So a while ago, we heard about WB making The Matrix reboot. It wasn't really a reboot, but a lot of people just heard Matrix coming back and heard that it wasn't going to be, the Wachowskis, and it wasn't going to be Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss and Lawrence
Hmm.
Fishburne, and thought that they were going to remake the old films. But really, all that they were suggesting was that they were going to tell a story in the world of the Matrix, and it was going to be completely disconnected from the events of that film. You have to look at the
Ah,
Matrix
I see.
universe like it's Star Wars. Basically, you can tell a story in Star Wars that has nothing to do with the Skywalker story. It can
Mm.
be something the Knights of the Old Republic, something in the world of like, the Mandalorians. It could be a completely new Jedi. It could, be a prequel to those stories, that sort of thing. And that was what WB was exploring. Um, and there was an outcry, like a knee-jerk reaction on social media, and people were like, "No, don't, you can't do that. Like, don't touch it. Blah blah." And so I
Uh,
got frustrated because that's what I really wanted. Because the Matrix to me is as rich, as fulfilling a universe as DC or Marvel or Star Wars. And I really love to see I love to see diverse stories being told. I feel like we're in a monopoly now, and there's a lack of variety of the stories that are being championed and the stories that are being told. Basically, all we have is Matrix is a MCU, DC to some extent, and Star Wars, and everything else is either not being told or struggling to be told. Is met with vitriol and rejected. So that sort of sets the scene for this news story and how I'm taking it. Now, when this was announced, the thought would be that, wow, I'd be like really happy. But actually, I'm kind of not happy.
Do you think it's maybe a
I'm,
reactionary decision? That maybe
no, I
they're
don't think
forcing
it's
themselves to
reaction
make a sequel
because
to the third one because of the reactions that people had to the news before,
exactly. So
instead of making something original. So now they don't really have a true well to draw from, but they're going to make it because of fan. Um,
that
yeah,
is the
that makes
first red
sense.
flag. That's the
Yeah,
first red
that makes a
flag.
lot of sense. I agree with that sentiment.
If they really cared about expanding this, if it was the company line that, oh, this is such a rich beautiful world that we want to tell stories and it shouldn't be dormant, then they should be making new stories. Just do them well and make sure they do justice to the legacy of the world that the Wachowskis built. It's a
Yeah.
world with which you can tell these amazing sci-fi blockbuster films, but also incorporate philosophy, spirituality, religion, politics.
Philosophy and all that. Oh, you said that right, didn't you?
Yeah, that's the legacy of the Matrix,
Yeah.
and you can tell
Existentialism.
this anywhere in its universe, in any time and any place, and still adhere to those
The
tenets.
the
So the
basic
first
principles,
red
yeah.
flag, yeah, the first red flag was that they're going to continue. Now everybody will be like, of course, like it's cool, they should continue. But if you remember, Neo is dead, Trinity is dead, and a lot of time has passed, and would Morpheus still be alive? So these are the hurdles that make me think that they're going to tell a story and it's going to be forced.
So you don't want a Matrix sequel trilogy, Lupe?
No, I do not want to. I love the way that the last one ended. Like, it ended beautifully. Neo's
The
story
Matrix
ended.
Awakens,
Yeah, no, Neo's story ended. Like,
the
he
last
really
Matrix.
like it's it's like, maybe making a Titanic 2. That's what it is like to me. And there's no logistical way that Neo can be revived or wake up or whatever. There's just none, because like I know the Matrix. Like I have, the only thing that I think they may do is that I think this press release might just be to get goodwill for for what they're about to do. It's possible that this is a story that's parallel to the Matrix, maybe another group of characters, but Neo and Trinity will make a cameo and they'll be de-aged.
Or some kind of appearance in some capacity, but just not maybe like an active role. Yeah, it makes
There is
sense.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget that these characters are much older than they were back then.
Yeah.
So there is no way that you can just plop them in that world, even if you say it's the past, because they're a lot older. They have aged, they've matured, like their bodies look different, their faces look different.
Mm.
So it's going to be like, I feel like they're doing this just because of the response they got on Twitter, and it's exploiting, a franchise that I love, which all studios do, but there should be some artistic integrity and there should be some love for the storytelling and should be genuine. And this just comes up
Well,
as
I mean,
not.
this is the thing, right? So they did get the original creators, so that does tell me that okay, they agreed to it and that they have some confidence in it to a degree. I mean, you're not going to agree to to start working on, a sequel to a project you did before, unless you felt like, you know, you could come up with something. So I mean, if they plop some, brand new director that's basically just there to, be a studio executive stand-in, or something like that, basically just a puppet in which to manipulate and create some marketable product, then okay. But they legit put the Wachowskis back there, so that's some goodwill for me as a person who isn't really even all that into the Matrix. I watched the original on TV, never watched it in theater. At that time, I wasn't even allowed to watch it. I mean, yeah, it was probably one of the tamest R-rated movies, but it wasn't until like years later on TV that I watched it. And I think I even watched.
They weren't R-rated.
Okay.
They're
Well, we
not.
can talk about that later, maybe. Because
Yeah. No. But I'm saying I can see why your parents might not have wanted you to watch, because it does have a lot of gun violence, and some parents are quite wary of their children watching films that glorify violence. So
sure.
yeah, it has
Well,
that, and I
there
can
was
see
a
why your
lot of
parents might
things
have to
in it. There was a lot of things in it that I mean, I honestly felt like it was a fine movie. Like it was super tame in my opinion. Once I actually did watch it, and then years later, I eventually got around to it. And then the second and the third one, I'm not even sure. I think I might have watched them in passing, but once again, like I'm very casual with the whole thing. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as the whole scenario goes, when I see this as like a third party person, third party in the situation, I'm seeing, a studio that was willing to put some kind of artistic insurance in there for viewers like me who actually even care about the director. I mean, most of the time, people don't actually care about the director in these franchise films. So the fact that they even bothered to bring him back, that kind of says something to me. But
All
yeah, I
right,
mean, I'm sure there's some nostalgia
let
at
me
play here.
counter that before you move on. Before you move on, let me.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but so you might be wondering, okay, Lupe, like, oh, the Wachowskis are involved. Like, shouldn't that give you confidence? It doesn't, and I'll tell you why. And I'll just be honest. When
They
was the
haven't.
last time
They
that
made
the
a good movie.
Wachowskis? When was the last time that the Wachowskis did something that you thought was as
Spectacular.
as Matrix or incredible?
Speed Racer was pretty awesome.
Okay, and how many years ago was that?
A long time.
Yeah, they've
What's
made a lot more since Speed Racer, a lot, and a lot of it. Now, obviously, it comes down to personal choice, but as a fan of the Matrix and somebody who's well aware of what they did with the Matrix, a lot of their future work has not been like the Matrix. And people change, people grow, they evolve, they do different things. I just feel like they're not the same creators they were when they made those films. They've made a lot of really bad decisions with films, and I feel like this is just another notch on that belt.
Mhm.
Also, I feel like their involvement is simply it's a buffer by the studio, and of course they'll be involved because they haven't had the success that they had with the Matrix. I mean, who wouldn't want to go back and do that again?
Yeah.
So
Well, they
them
haven't
being
done anything at all since 2015. Like
yeah, no,
Jupiter Ascending, and then before that, Cloud Atlas.
yeah,
You
Cloud
know,
Atlas was not that good. I don't want
no,
to be too harsh on them, but I didn't like their creative decisions with Cloud Atlas.
me
I
neither.
didn't like their creative
Yeah.
decisions with Jupiter Ascending. That was another disappointment. They've done a lot of TV since then. They did the Sense8 series, another for me critical misfire, another misfire for me. That show actually has a lot of fans, but in light of what they did with the Matrix, that style of storytelling, they're just not there anymore. They're doing something completely different. So, them being attached is not really good news to me. Now, also, the report doesn't even say they're attached. It's only one of them is attached, which is very strange.
That is strange.
They're a
Mm.
they're a duo, two sisters. They're a duo who create everything together virtually. And for once, only one of them is attached. It is really strange and brings, I don't know, some things into question. I don't know. But please go ahead. I just wanted, because you mentioned the directors being
Sure.
involved.
I mean, the thing is that they did make The Matrix, and yes, they have changed, and yes, the content they've made since then hasn't been as good. So, I suppose, those are all real good reasons to maybe not be as excited, right? Um, I feel like there's still some merit there. I think that bringing back the original directors, at least that they're going to attempt to try to bring the spirit back. I mean, the thing is that if you bring back another director, then I expect that director to bring their own sensibilities. I don't like when studios put directors in a chair of a franchise just for them to basically, create some kind of product that appeals to everyone and doesn't really include their own sensibilities. Like, oh, I'm just here to continue the legacy and blah 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 blah. It's like, no,
I
like
mean, you mean
make
like Zack Snyder on Man of Steel and Batman v Superman?
well, he made his own product.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not necessary that a new director that comes in is not going to use their own voice and have artistic integrity. That's
Well, okay, so we can get into a whole conversation about whether Superman lives up to some kind of uh, intrinsic notion as to what Superman really is, as if he is one thing, But yeah, we can get into, we have and we will, I'm sure, get into that conversation again. But from my perspective, as far as art is concerned, as far as vision is concerned, if you're going to make a straight up sequel to something, right, and you're not going to actually make a spin-off or something else in the same universe, okay, then bringing back the original director at least gives me it doesn't necessarily confirm the quality, but what it does confirm is that there's going to be a certain level of integrity to the original vision, and they're going to keep that on track. I have no problem with them going and doing, with a studio going and doing other things, but I do. If you're gonna make a continuation of the story, I want to have the same sensibilities and the same integrity there. So that's just my personal take on the matter.
yeah. I get it. I mean, my take on it is that I didn't want a sequel in the first place, and if there was a sequel, I didn't want it to have any of the former players.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't make any sense at all, because the two people that they bring back, they both died. So how can this be a Matrix 4? It has to, like, it just seems like they're reaching.
Yeah.
And like we'll see how it goes. I'm filled with a lot of trepidation, and I'm not as excited as you would expect someone who's a diehard, Matrix fan to be. I'm actually quite against this.
Yeah.
Not against this, like it shouldn't be made. It should be made, I guess,
As
but
long as there is integrity there, as long as there is vision there, as long as there is a certain level of creative, desire, love, respect, reverence for the work, and they're trying to make a product that is good in its own right, as opposed to just being marketable.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we've talked about this for quite. We went on much longer than we wanted to. Really tried to go in depth. It was a very impassioned, discussion.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it for sure. So as far as where you can reach us, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. You can find us on Twitter at the Film Exiles. You can find us our network account at the Exiles Net. We're on Vero at the Film Exiles. You can get us at Gmail at thefilmexiles@gmail.com. Our WordPress website is the Exiles Network. I'm sorry, the exilesnetwork.wordpress.com. And you can find me, I'm Millennial Mike at Velcro16, that's spelled wrong with a K, VLKRO16. And where can they find you, Lupe?
Glad that we got to do this. You can find me on Twitter at Live Love Lupe. I hope you guys will tune in for some more content we'll be putting out. You can usually find me doing like short reviews. You can find me doing special editions where we dive into like some special topics, and we'll try to put out more quick news like analysis bites like this, and we hope that you guys will join in the conversation.
Oh, also too, Chris is doing some amazing work over on our YouTube page, so you gotta check that out.
Yes.
That's on YouTube at the
Yeah,
Exiles Network.
we're going to post this to YouTube as well. So
Yes, all of our
yeah.
content's going to be going up on YouTube. I think, it's always a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to have the YouTube episodes go up one day before our public SoundCloud normal RSS feed goes up. So you should be able to catch it there if you're a YouTube listener or watcher. But anyway, we thank you for all you guys tuning in, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. See you guys.